Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, I would like to tell you all that today we are going to discuss about the two famous poets Thomas Wyatt and Surrey, as well as we are going to discuss about the various sonnets of Thomas Wyatt and Surrey, the two poets. And for this we have again with us in our studios Professor Anand Prakash. Professor Prakash is retired professor from Delhi University from Department of English. So dear friends, let's take advantage from his experiences and try to understand more about Thomas Wyatt and Surrey, as well as let's try to know more about the sonnets of Thomas Wyatt and Surrey. So without wasting any time, I would like to welcome our guest, Professor Anand Prakash. Sir, welcome to the EduSet lecture.
Thank you, Gitika, and welcome viewers. Today we are a part of the series that devotes itself to the texts in literature. And the texts I have chosen are sonnets of the two, finest sonneteers in English, Wyatt and Surrey, who were in the 16th century. Before I begin discussing their sonnets, or the sonnet that took place and became was shaped in their hands, I'd like to make one or two general comments about these two poets. These two poets were born in the family of aristocrats, and the very moment you think of individuals from the aristocracy, to come forward to write poems or literature, one starts wondering. You wonder as to what made them write poetry at a time when poetry was not enjoying the kind of premium it does later. And let me also tell you, friends, that after Chaucer in the 14th century, you have a kind of dark period in English literature where poets may have been there, but they did not enjoy limelight. And there were books written. There were, of course, writers. Already you have heard a lecture on Thomas More, in fact, two lectures on Thomas More's Utopia, that the famous text of the early 16th century. And these poets came immediately after Thomas More's arrival on the scene. Thomas More was born in the 15th century, and he spent a large part of it in the 15th century, but then he was there as an active writer in the 16th century, and in the 1530s he was executed. Now this word execution also has a kind of connotation, because this aristocracy from where these individual authors came, this aristocracy was a part of the power game. And particularly in the case of Wyatt and Surrey, because they came from the family of lords, they would be very close to the king. They would be enjoying power at the court also. And if they wrote poetry, if they expressed their views, if they behaved somewhat independently than others, more independently than others, then they would be cause raising of the eyebrows. People would look at them, their behavior, the implications of their stand if they took a stand, and things like that. So both these poets were also executed, and in the prime of their lives. For instance, Thomas Wyatt would be 39 when he would be put to death, and Surrey would be just 30 when he would also meet his end, because they did something that was controversial, and that controversy also may have been a part of their behavior as poets, as was Thomas More. He, not exactly as a literary figure, he was a political figure of the highest kind. But these two poets also were on the missions of the government sometime. They enjoyed all the privileges of the upper class, and they were in fact a kind of in a kind of relationship, friendly relationship, or relationship that is competitive in nature with the king himself. And the king in all these cases, Thomas More earlier and Wyatt and Surrey a little later, just a few years difference, all of them were personally known to the king. In fact, so far as Wyatt is concerned, we know that Wyatt was a lover of the woman who became the Queen of England, that is Thomas More's wife. I'm referring to Anne Boleyn. And he loved this woman, and this love was very deep, and he would express it sometimes. But then, and the king knew that he was in a kind of relationship with her. So imagine the future Queen of England would have a kind of relationship with Wyatt, and Wyatt would know that the king is taking now interest in Anne Boleyn, the woman I'm talking of. Then he would be self-conscious. He knows that he can't compete with the king, and the king has rights. He has a kind of control over the whole population. He's the worldly lords in the literal sense of the word, and all men and women belong to him. That kind of a tradition, orthodoxy that existed, and this had a kind of influence on these poets, and they became helpless as to what to do about the idea, the theme, the relationship, the feeling, the emotion associated with love. So this is one part. So I say that these poets came from the aristocracy, and they were known to the highest people in the land, and they also at that point of time thought of loving. Where did this idea of love come from? In the 16th century, it is not there in this form in Chaucer's time. It's not there perhaps in the 15th century, but it's there in the 16th century. Wyatt is born in the 16th century. 1503 is the year when he is born, and he dies in 42 at the age of 39. And these 39 that he spends in the 16th century, this period somehow has brought in the theme of love. Where did it come from? My answer is that in the 16th century there was a relative stability in the country, and people started looking around for inspiration, for ideas, for ideals, for principles, for the new kind of morality, all those things. And the country that came easy for them to get literature from was Italy. And Italy had at that point of time a very famous poet. He belonged to a slightly earlier period, Petrarch, and they read Petrarch and they liked him. He held a kind of appeal to them, and Petrarch was writing sonnets in Italian, and these people thought that they enjoyed reading Petrarch's sonnets, and they even translated Petrarch's sonnets in Italian into English to make it available to the readers of literature then. So this is one part, and Petrarch was writing about love, and there was a kind of convention about love in those days. This convention has existed, in fact, all over the world. If somebody writes love poetry in different parts of the world, then love is associated somehow with helplessness. You love a person whom you can't marry. You love a person who will never agree to marry you, who is beyond you. You may not even be able to express love to a woman, because it's not easy to express oneself at that point of time. There is nothing like a courtship then, the way it existed quite early later, but then it was not there at that time. So most of the lovers in England at that point of time, and the idea came from Petrarch. These lovers would be just watching, observing a young, beautiful lady, and they would be dreaming of spending time with her. And since it was not possible to join them in matrimony or in a relationship of physical intimacy, therefore they would always remain sad, lonely, forlorn, even desolate. And Petrarch was writing such sonnets. He had a woman in mind. People wonder whether this woman was actually there. The name was Laura, or whether she was the figment of his imagination. He had created her in his imagination, and he wanted to express love for her. It's not very clear. But then he was writing regularly about Laura, about his desire to be next to her, to be with her, and to talk to her. And since there no other medium would be available, and if it's an imaginary character, then he is talking to himself. He is talking to that self of his, which is moved by the idea of a beautiful woman with whom we can communicate at the level of feelings and emotions. So, this idea came from Petrarch to England at that time, and the first thing that these poets did was translating Petrarch into English. Now, the second part also is important here, because the texts that I will be taking up for some consideration are the sonnets. And since Petrarch was writing sonnets, those sonnets should be made available to the English reader in England, English reader. And was English capable of carrying those ideas, those subtle emotions which were there in Italian? That's the first question. These people had, of course, hold on the English language then, but English language was not developed enough in the 16th century. The way it might develop, later in the 1580s, 90s, when Shakespeare comes on the scene, he starts adopting English majorly for communication, and then of course the rest is history. Then the 17th century, English has come into its own and has given the great authors, starting from Shakespeare, Ben Jonson to Milton, and so on and so forth. So in the 16th century, this English also is enriched because Wyatt and Surrey would be translating sonnets from Italian into English, and they would be thinking of words, they would be thinking of shades of meaning, they would be thinking of phrases, they would be thinking of idioms, they would coin new phrases, some words which could be used in 4 or 5 senses, because after all English at that point of time is nearer a dialect than a language. English is not established as a language in the 16th century. So different words have different connotations. In parts of the country, in London, in parts of London itself, also with respect to the lower masses, the middle rung masses or the upper masses. So the same word will have different meanings there. So languages being a dialect at that point of time would be a very slippery thing, would be a tough customer to really handle. And if language was difficult to handle, then that would offer other difficulties. But these people started expressing Petrarch's emotions and feelings captured by him in his language into English, and this of course, as I said, would be giving a new kind of vocabulary to the English language. So this is another part, and thirdly, Wyatt and Surrey would bring in the element of English experience and combine it with what Petrarch would say, because after all, when language is transferred from one, literature is transferred from one language to another, then it carries with it certain influences of the original language, but it also compromises with, adjusts with, and adapts to the peculiarities of the what is today called in translation discussions target language. So English would also slightly transform the shape and the contour of the Italian expression. So this is what was happening in the early years of the 16th century when these people started translating Petrarch. And at some point of time, maybe in the 30s, early 30s, it would have occurred to Wyatt and Surrey that, and Surrey, and particularly Wyatt, because Wyatt was the first to begin experimenting with the sonnet form. It would have occurred to him that he should write sonnets in English also. So in fact, Wyatt introduces this new form to the English reader, and this new form is the sonnet form. Now, sonnet form is from a distance appears to be very difficult to hold. The reason is that it's bound by certain conventions. You cannot write a poem and call it a sonnet. A sonnet has to be of a particular kind, and Petrarchan sonnet had 14 lines. The whole thing has to be said in 14 lines, whatever you say. And then there is a kind of metrical scheme. I talked about it in the previous discussions. I don't want to go into them at the moment. But then the 14-line thing and rhyming scheme, that would be peculiar to the sonnet form. And these people adopted the sonnet form in their own way. They took liberties with it. They would not exactly follow the Petrarchan kind of rhyming scheme, but they would rhyme the lines. they would stick to the format of 14 lines, and then the language would be English. Now, if the language is English, the person is English, and there is a model before this person, Thomas Wyatt, for instance. There is one thing that is going to put some pressure on him, and that is the English experience. And English experience is a dubious thing at the time, is a difficult thing, is something that one can't trust. It's not trustworthy. Therefore, they would stick to the emotion of love and the emotion and the aspect of feeling. So, sonnet and a love sonnet. Originally in Italian, sonnet was a love sonnet, and these people would always talk about love. But love in England, as I said, in those conditions when the aristocracy was taking liberties with the population in general and the contenders from the aristocracy in particular. Therefore, it was very difficult to even write about love. So, I say that it appears very simple that one can talk about love, but then in the 16th century it is very challenging to express oneself in the context of love. Now, since I have already reached the stage where sonnet is there, sonnet has to talk about love. Let me also say that sonnet is used by these writers, by Thomas Wyatt in particular, to standardize language, to use a word in a sense that will make the word somewhat fixed in it. Also, when you write a sonnet, when Wyatt writes a sonnet, then he requires readers, and there are not many means of getting sonnets published. Some sonnets would be published immediately after his death in an anthology that is supposed to be one of the first anthologies containing sonnets of Wyatt and other people at that time, and that will happen, let's say, immediately after their death. But when these two people wrote sonnets, when Wyatt, for instance, wrote sonnets, then he would make a few copies of the sonnets. One master copy he would keep with himself. He can get other copies made also in handwritten form, and then he can circulate it among his friends and admirers. So, that was the way to reach the reader. So, the reader would not be in the 16th century more than 15 or 20, and sometimes they might get together and they might discuss sonnets, and it was mainly to entertain a small audience. So, maybe in the evening when one has dinner, one has drinks, one has discussion, etc., then somebody can say, okay, you are at this point of time indulging in some kind of poetic expression, so let us share it. Tell us what you have written. And Wyatt or Surrey, they would be reading out their sonnets. So, these were the only way in which sonnets should be shared by the poets. They would write, they would make copies, they would circulate copies. Sometimes when people assembled, then they would read out their sonnets, and then there will be discussion. And you will find that sonnets are also somehow talking in the sense of I. So, it is not a conventional love that they are talking about. They are not talking about the love between the old mythical figures, as Chaucer would have done in the 14th century. They would not do that. They would talk in the first person singular, I do this, I do that, and that this I becomes a common kind of expression. If my sonnets present me as I, then the person who is hearing also translates the sonnet into his kind of I. So, one I gets transformed into the I or the identity of the other person also. So, that way sonnets started appealing in the 16th century in this form. I am just going a little further and say that one of the major sonnetteers in English language again is Shakespeare, who the greatest poet that England produced, the greatest dramatist that England produced, and he was also writing sonnets regularly. In fact, he wrote about 155 or so sonnets. So, this became by the time Shakespeare appears on the scene. Shakespeare appears 50 years after these people are dead. He is writing his sonnets in 1590 onwards. So, you know that these people start the sonnets in the 1520s and 30s, then these sonnets are popular. Then an anthology of sonnets and other poems appears on the scene after their death sometime in 1560 or so. And by the time Shakespeare is there on the scene in 1580s and 90s, sonnet has become such a popular form that the great bard of Stratford upon Avon, that is Shakespeare, he has so many sonnets to his credit. Of course, after that, there is an unending process that there are sonnets written also in the 20th century. In the 19th century, there were great sonneteers. Wordsworth himself would write sonnets, for instance. In the 18th century, people would write sonnets. So this tradition continued. Milton has written a large number of sonnets in the 17th century itself. So I went slightly off. Let's now get back to the 16th century when Wyatt and Surrey were writing sonnets. In order to talk about a particular sonnet, in this case, I'll take the text, but I'll not you use the text on the screen. I would be presenting to you the prose version of the sonnet to you, and then I'll discuss this sonnet just as an example. That way, we can understand the sonnet better, because then the queerness and the oddity of the language doesn't become a hindrance between us and the sonnets. So I also do this. I also present this prose version of the sonnets in the spoken form, because in the sonnet you generally have statements, and within the statements there are things which make the lines very rich in connotation. So you start wondering as to what kind of a statement is being made here. So I'll make those statements before you, and then I'll let you know how to judge the emotion that is captured in the sonnet by Wyatt or Surrey. I'm just presenting this sonnet to you because this is a love sonnet. This is written by Wyatt. It is about his love with a capital L, and you'll find that there are certain interesting aspects to love. And then he has, obviously, there is a very direct, straight kind of a reference to Anne Boleyn, who might have become queen at the time, because she displaced the original queen, Catherine of Aragon, and there was a big ruckus there in the country, in the upper echelons of power in England, and things were very momentous. I don't want to go into that. Reformation happened at the same time, but then this Anne Boleyn is at the center of this sonnet, and just see how Wyatt expresses his emotion for her. He says that if somebody wants to know where to find the she deer, the beautiful she deer, the animal that one has to hunt, one knows where to find her. She is there at some place in the forest. That is the first sentence. If one wants to know, then one can always go to that place and find her there. The hind, the beautiful deer, is there in the forest. And then in the second statement he says, but so far as I am concerned, I may not search for her. Now see the opposite. This is the interesting part. If somebody wants to do it, let him go. I will not go. And everybody is saying is that he wants to go but cannot go. But he says, I may know more. When he says, I may know more, that I don't want to any longer go, any more I want to go for her, which means there is a history. He is hiding something. He is telling his friends very clearly that he is talking about the woman who is not now accessible to him, who is not approachable to him. Then he says, the problem of meeting this woman has already made me feel tired. Why am I tired? Because when I think of her, then all the pain comes rushing back to me, into my mind, and I can't bear this pain. Okay? This is the second statement he is making. And he says, if there is a queue for people who would search for her, then I'll be the last one in the queue. Now, see how cleverly the idea is expressed, which means he has not left the queue. He'll be there in the queue, but he'll be the last one. This is a matter of saying. Last one means I'll be at the end only, and maybe I'll come very late, and maybe I'm not visible also, but then I'll be farthest from her. He's using the word farthest. Then he says, if you ask me whether to hunt for her or not, hunt has a large number of meanings. After all, it's a deer, so one can hunt for her. Lady also can be hunted, and hunted means, you know, that the man is powerful, the male is powerful. The male can capture the woman and can keep her with him, force her with him, or he can in the meantime fascinate her and she might agree to be with him. In any case, the word hunting has lots of connotations, and it's the 16th century word for love. So when you hunt for a woman, actually you are searching for her, for her favors, etc. And then, so far as he is concerned, he says, don't waste your time. It's very difficult to hunt for this particular woman. The hind, the definite article is there. Of course, he says an hind, but then an hind definitely means, you know, that she is there. So he says, I will not draw near this deer, the hind, as she flees afore. She is running away from me. Already she has gone out of bounds so far as I am concerned. And then he says, even if I caught her, could I hold her? And he uses in the statement itself, he uses a simile. The simile is, can you catch wind in the net? If you can catch wind in the net, then I can catch her also, which means it's impossible to catch her. If there is a net, the wind will pass through it. And you go into the connotations, she is in the bushes, she is in the forest, she is in thick vegetation, and the wind can pass through thick vegetation, and she is a slippery customer. There was a time when she was with me, so suddenly she found that the king was taking interest in her, and she also might have been tempted to become the Queen of England. And if she becomes Queen of England, then she becomes totally unapproachable to me. And the writer is saying all this very clearly, very directly, through a statement that he is making in the sonnet form. So, what is his state of mind now? Already, you know, lots of ifs and buts have been expressed in the poem. He wants to, he cannot, he'll stand in the queue, he'll be the last one. If he catches her, he can't hold her, and which means that he tries to catch her imaginatively, but then he knows that it's impossible to catch her. Since in the net I seek to hold the wind. Okay, this is one important sentence. And if somebody else tries to do so, I have already expressed the statement that then, you know, this person is doing in vain, it's impossible, therefore why waste your time there? And then, you know, he makes a definitive reference, a particular reference to the queen. This particular lady, this particular deer, this particular hind, this is wearing you know, a kind of placard, a kind of jewel, you know, on which it is written. What is written there? On her fair neck. She has a fair neck, of course, and then he says, it's written there on the jewel that she is wearing, noli me tangere, for Caesar's I am, and the translation is, touch me not, for I am Caesar's. And Caesar in this case, the great Caesar of Rome, that Caesar is Henry VIII. So I belong to, it is written there. Now this is many connotations again. These are the last two lines. So I say this, you know, that in this particular line, she says that I am meant for him. And I am wearing around my neck a particular chain where there is a jewel there, and on the jewel are engraved the words, touch me not, I am of Caesar. Touch me not, I am of Henry VIII. What is the connotation? The woman has already been owned. She has been captured. She has been hunted. And now she belongs to him, to the king, as property. So did she have a choice? Initially she had a choice. Perhaps she could, you know, withstand the you know, the temptations that came from the king. But could she? Could she say no to the king? Even if she wanted, she could not. So she left her love for Thomas Wyatt. She went over to the king. She became his consort. She became his wife, and now, you know, she is wearing a badge. She is wearing an ornament, and on the ornament is engraved the word, touch me not, I belong to somebody else. Is it marriage? Is it a love affair? Is the woman captured? Is she held as a possession? All these implications are there. And since the language, in this sonnet is of the 16th century, so these words are very fluid. These days they will have different connotations if somebody is using them. But in those days, hunting, catching, keeping, wearing a particular a necklace on which engraved the name of the husband. Of course, one knows that even till today, women always have the surname of the husband. Now there might be some exceptions, but mostly women are supposed to bear the name of the husband because they are his property. And he is expressing this idea in the 16th century in the context of the queen. The queen is wearing an ornament on which is written, I am Caesar's, I am the king's, so nobody should come near me. And then he says, and wild for to hold, I am madly wanting to hold her. But then he says, I seem tame. Tame means I am a coward. I really can't fight. So the point that I want to make in the context of this sonnet is that this sonnet is about helplessness. It is about pain. It is also about the history of relationship of the individual. This also talks about the autocracy, the authority, the kind of arrogance that the king has associated with him. He can capture any woman, he can hunt for her, he can keep her with him, and if she has a lover, and if the lover really genuinely loved her, then this person has to wait endlessly and he will never get her. Now, this is the literal, I have presented the statements which work at the literal level, but go into the metaphor of it. Suppose one is not talking of a woman, one is talking of the ordinary masses, one is talking of the country. The country is in the hands of the king. The king has somehow manipulated things in such a manner that the country cannot have freedom of any kind. And there are issues, I told you, that the Reformation has happened, and the ordinary masses, they were beholden to Rome, the Pope of Rome. They were all Christians, they were all Roman Catholics. And the king at one point of time said that this Pope of Rome is not allowing me to have my way in my own country, therefore I swear my connections with him. And in European history this happened for the first time, that a Christian country said openly, announced openly that it will not have any connection with the Pope of Rome. Should the people believe in God and his verdict, or should they believe in the king and his verdict? This thing was there. And if one raises this question in the 16th century, then one realizes that people thought that God created them, and that they had to accord full importance, complete importance to the dictates of God, who spoke through their conscience, who also spoke through, let's say, the word of Pope. The Pope would tell the masses as to what God means, what God wants, and how God's command is to be obeyed. But then the king created a problem for the masses. The king started saying, don't believe in Pope. Pope is not the true person. Believe in that person whom I appoint as the English archbishop. This person will interpret things for you. And more than that, even this person will not do, actually read the Bible. And when you read the Bible, then whatever is you understand about the Bible, accept that as God's verdict. So this is called Reformation. This is called Protestantism. And Protestantism also had emerged in some other parts of the country, particularly Germany, and the idea came from there. But for the English masses, whom should they obey? Who should be their beloved? Who should be the person to whom they belong? Should it be God? Should it be the king? So you imagine that the king was manipulating people's attention in such a manner that as if he owned the authority of God and the authority of love and all those things. So love in this case becomes a matter of individual choice, in a sense that the choice is of the individual, but the individual cannot do anything. So love has also to be captured and hunted for by somebody else, by an authority. So see the symbolical meaning. This poem talks about the literal meaning of a lover, his helplessness, and the helplessness of the masses also. Now, the third and last thing about this text, this particular sonnet, I wanted to take it in some detail. So far as this sonnet is concerned, this also talks about the emergence of a new idea in England. That idea is that people will express themselves through their I, through their individuality. So they will say, I don't believe in this, I believe in this, I want to love, I want to do this, I cannot do it. In all cases, the common word is I. So how is it that in England in the 16th century people have emerged and using a word which didn't make any sense till the 16th century? People would always say, ask tradition, ask the family, ask the neighborhood, ask the controller of morality, ask the priest. They would always go for guidance to other people. But these writers of the sonnets, they say, I believe this, I don't like it, I cannot do it. So in a way, kind of individualism has emerged, and I'm not going to answer this question, but I'll raise this question in this discussion. When you read this sonnet, and when you read other sonnets, and in the sonnet, the writer is talking in first person singular, then one should ask the question as to how there is a kind of a change in England in the 16th century, because of which people have started using the first person singular. In fact, one guess would be that from now onwards, feelings would domain to an individual, and very soon you will have plays coming to the fore. In 1580s, there will be a large number of plays written by different people. In the 1590s, Shakespeare would be there to present characters talking in their own voice. These characters, when they talk on the stage, they will use the word I again and again, which didn't happen earlier. In fact, there are no plays in England in the 16th century worth the name, till these people come with the sonnets. So are sonnets then precursors to drama? Because I told you that the person is expressing an opinion, then is going against it, and he's presenting a clash between what he spoke in the previous statement. So you make a statement, then you start criticizing the statement, and then you go to a third statement, and then you show your helplessness. And in all the cases, you are dealing with many contentious, competing ideas and influences, and that's how drama is created in the structure of the sonnet itself. And one thing I can repeat, that actually in a sonnet you have started using statements as if you are arguing something. So that particular thing is there. I'll use another sonnet to extend this idea further, and then we can think of Surrey. He says here once again, the sonnet starts with my. So either I or my galley charged with forgetfulness through sharp seas in winter nights does pass between rock and rock. Anyway, the question is that he has been surrounded by forgetfulness, he doesn't know what to do, and all around are rocks, and he has to steer clear through the rocks into the sea so that his boat can remain moving unhindered. The statement is, I have a boat, I am riding it, and I am going through the rocks. The boat might strike against one, and it might be overturned, and I might be drowned. So I have to be very careful about steering this boat in waters that have rocks. That's the first thing. And then he says that he can do it with the force of love. Very interesting. So life is a boat, the person is riding it, and you can get guidance from reason. Reason would be individual, or you can get guidance from love. Very interesting thing in this sonnet is that he is talking about my enemy. My enemy is there. Who is my Lord? Can your enemy be your Lord? And then when I read it, I became slightly curious about the use of the word enemy. And then I read that the word enemy is referred for love. So enemy is love. Is love an enemy of a person? And love will guide you through the thick and thin of life. And then, I started thinking and I realized, yes, love is an enemy. In the sense, that it's not allowed. It's your individuality, and individuality is not allowed. So that way, one loves one's enemy. Well, enemy means a challenger, a person who challenges you. So in fact, love challenges you. And when love challenges you, when it puts you in difficulty, when it starts embarrassing you, then of course you think more and more about it. So that in fact is what is happening. And my love is my Lord, my love is enemy. Enemy is keeping me on the toes all the time, and just see how the metaphor is developing into this kind of a shape. Then he talks about fearfulness. He talks about sighs. You are sighing also all the time, and wearied chords. See the metaphor, and it's very difficult to particularly in metered lines, and when the lines are limited in number, there to extend a metaphor and then to hold on to it is very important and very challenging, very difficult. And just see that when the person is writing this metaphor of the boat, so the boat has sails, the boat has ropes also tied to the sail, etc. And these boats are called cords, and these cords are at that time under pressure, and they are being damaged by the practice of the rider of the boat ride, and these pressures are damaging cords so much that they might break any time. Then there were annotations that I also looked at, and I found that cord can also mean something to do with heart. So the heart also is damaged, and the moment you think of cord as heart, then you think of love. So you see the metaphor. The metaphor is of the boat. The boat is the human life. Then the reason is guiding you. That reason is actually not reason, it is love, and love is your enemy, and the enemy is keeping you alert. Now just see how he is weaving a kind of a pattern where finally love, life, etc. all will become so very complex that one will lose one's way. And initially, as I said, it starts with my galley, my kind of personality, my kind of body, myself that is charged with forgetfulness. And the word forgetfulness also is tricky, because forgetfulness is not exactly that you remembered something earlier and now you have forgotten. It also means that you are mixed up, that you are confused. So forgetting means confused in the 16th century sense also. So confusion and forgetfulness, they have been fused into one, because when you read the sonnet, then the idea is about not finding any way. That is created through metaphor, the metaphor of the rocks, the metaphor of the waters, which are so very dangerous to work into. And therefore, life actually becomes, in its complexity, informed by the details of the metaphor. The other parts of the metaphor are rain of tears. What a beautiful way of talking about this detail about the rain in the first place. There will be a rain when you are in the sea, and that rain will complicate, may make your life difficult of the person who is doing the boat, who is running the boat, moving the boat. And then if there is rain, then many things become slippery and all. But then it's a rain of tears. So very soon the boat turns into the boat rider, the boatman who is plying the boat, who is moving it, and then this person has pain, and this pain is of the heart. So in fact, the heart is sinking maybe because of the difficulty and the strain. So all these things are there, and then there can be mistakes and errors. There can also be a lack of knowledge. All these words are there. I'm just having a look at the words, and I see how the whole thing is made complex here. The stars be hid that led me to this pain. So there are stars; those stars would not be there. Tears have started coming. These tears that make us think of clouds, and then there is pain, and the reason is drowned, because it's raining and there is this water under the boat also, and the reason is drowned. Once everyone thinks of forgetfulness, but more than forgetfulness, it is confusion and lack of clarity. And the last line of the sonnet is, and I remain despairing of the port which I have to reach, the destination which I have to meet, that destination is despairing. I know I can't reach it. That's the situation of hopelessness. So from the beginning till the end, the person is caught in the ups and downs of life, in the ups and downs of love. So life and love, they have become fused into each other, and that's what the sonnet is. And who is writing the sonnet? Thomas Wyatt. That same Thomas Wyatt who in the previous sonnet that we discussed said that so far as his love is concerned, he can't get it. And others also might try, but they also will not be getting it, because the love, the capital L, the lady, she is wearing a particular ornament which says, I belong to Caesar, I belong to Henry VIII. And therefore his situation is such. A person born in the aristocratic family, a person who is a genuine, honest person of integrity, who loves a woman, he is first, he's refused by the woman because she has, dreams of becoming the queen. And finally, he doesn't know what to do, where to go, and therefore he finds that form which Petrarch, invented. He used that form in the English context, and he wrote sonnets of helplessness and love. Petrarch may talk about the fascination that the lady holds for him. This person is talking about the helplessness that the lady has created in his mind. And the second sonnet seems to be directly, coming out of the previous sonnet, because here he is totally confused. So this is what I have already asked questions about it, friends, and now I think I'll take up in the rest of the time at our disposal. In brief, this case of Earl of Surrey, who was younger to this person by 14-15 years, and they also seem to be connected in the upper families, cluster of families. And Earl of Surrey, his name was Henry Howard, and he is called Earl of Surrey, and for brevity's sake we call him just Surrey. And he was born in 1517, 14 years after Thomas Wyatt, and he died at the age of 30 in 1547, and he was executed. And the details are, that somebody just framed a case against him, and in those days the upper classes were involved in this kind of a thing always, tricking people, hatching conspiracy against them, all those things. And then something was done, and the king being king, he would believe in one person or the other, and in this case, to the bad luck of Surrey, he believed in somebody else's version, and the person was executed at the young age of 30. But then, for us, what is important is that he wrote sonnets, and he also, translated like his predecessor Wyatt, sonnets from and poems from Petrarch and others. And in fact, so far as translation is concerned, this person was translating also some of the major classics, at least parts of them. He could not do all that in the short life that he had, but then he translated parts of Virgil's Aeneid, for instance. And that's an epic, and if one can translate that, then the person must be very gifted in terms of a language. Virgil wrote in Latin, and if he knows Latin, if he knows Italian, and the two languages, Italian was modern and Latin was old classical language, so he translated from there also into English. He also has one particular attribute to his personality, and that is that one of his first poems was the first English poem in blank verse. Before that, nobody has written. His poem was the first English poem in blank verse. And what is blank verse? Blank verse, we have had discussions about blank verse. People generally liked, to write in rhyme. The last line will agree with the sound pattern of the next line, and so on and so forth. So that is called rhyming. Now, in the blank verse, you will have the meter, you will have the measure, you will have the yardstick. The line is to be so long as this. So all lines will be equal length, so far as words are concerned. but then it will not rhyme. If it doesn't rhyme, then one restriction is gone. You don't have to think of now a word which rhymes with the previous word at the end. You can carry on, etc. And this in fact frees the English versification from that particular stranglehold of the rhyme. And after this, the English language, particularly in verse form, will become free as prose. You can keep on talking about your feelings in prose for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes continuously, and you never bother about where you have to stop, except that you have to stop after the particular length of the line. But then when you stop there, you don't have to think of the rhyme. So that's called blank verse. And once the blank verse is introduced by these people, particularly Surrey, then this will become a reigning kind of, a ruling kind of, a controlling kind of a meter, that will continue once again through all the centuries. So Shakespeare is once again the biggest user of the blank verse. His lines don't rhyme. So this thing is practiced here by Surrey. He translates sonnets. He writes his first English poem in blank verse. He writes lyrics, and then the useful thing for him is that he is more into translation than his predecessor, and this translation was, as I said, this contributed to the evolution of English writing, because when you had translations available in England, then a large number of readers will read this translation and they would emulate the example of the original writer. So 16th century is waking up to the requirements of literature, and it's a very big historical cultural fact, that in the 18th century the country called England is coming up as a place where more and more writers will now take to writing. More and more individuals, young people, they will take to writing, and they will express their experiences, and those experiences then could be available in this form, in the settled form, for ages to come. So in a way, history of English literature also is beginning to take shape in the 16th century, and these two poets have a contribution to make to the making of history of English literature. So I can just talk briefly about this sonnet. I'll just finish in 2 or 3 minutes because the time is more or less up, so far as I'm concerned. So I'll just say he talks the same thing as Wyatt, but then he talks in a simpler way, in a more lucid manner. Wyatt seems to be all the time going into the intricacies of love, and he is not able to express himself. But so far as Surrey is concerned, he can talk more fluently. So in Wyatt you have jerks, you have jolts, you have complexity. This person is more lucid, he is more lyrical, he has a better flow. And he talks about love. So once again, the first word is love. Earlier it was forgetfulness. It does reign and live within my thought. This young man of 30 always thinks of love. Always, all the time. He doesn't think of power, he doesn't think of palaces. In fact, he is higher placed than Wyatt in terms of his birth. 2 of the queens of Henry VIII were his nieces. Imagine the kind of power and status that the person enjoyed. And Anne Boleyn, whom Thomas Wyatt loved, and who later on became the Queen of England, he was his niece, and the next one after Anne Boleyn was also executed. Now it's a history of executions. Everybody who becomes important in England is done to death, and the same thing happened to Anne Boleyn also. And it is suggested that when she was being executed in public, then Wyatt was looking from the bars, from behind the bars in his jail. So anyway, so you have love here all the time. And the last line is, sweet is the death that takes end by love. So if in the cause of love you die, then that's the sweet death. So this is in a way is the kind of thing that one has to keep in mind while. So friends, I'm coming to the end of it. Now I'll speak 1 or 2 sentences and finish it. And what I like about Surrey is that he is some kind of a friend and a loyalist who will not bother about his safety. The other person has been executed. This person also will be going to he'll be executed later on. The way he is fearless and courageous. So he writes a poem about Wyatt, and the poem is called "Wyatt Rests Here." So he went to his grave and he wrote a poem about it. So he announced it to the people, that he doesn't bother whether the regime was against Wyatt or not. He will pay his tribute to Wyatt. So this is the kind of courage, this is the kind of identity as a person that these people espoused, and this is how they contributed to the growth of sonnet in particular and writing of poetry in general. So with this I finish.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. We are short of time over here. Otherwise, we would have discussed and I would have asked you questions. But still, I would like to thank you again. And dear friends, if you have any queries or if you want to give your feedback regarding this particular lecture, then you can mail us at info.cec@nic.in so that the next time when Professor Anand Prakash visits us, we would be love to solve your queries. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.